Hello again. You're welcome to Gilmore's Ballygar. This is episode 3 of the Gilmore Story, and I thought, as they say, a picture tells 1,000 words, so why not bring you to Ballygar? So you were all most welcome to Ballygar, County Galway, and the home of a young lad called Patrick S Gilmore back in the 19th century. Today it's a lovely little town in North County Galway, but as I bring you through it, please remember that we're visiting a town that a young Gilmore and his fellow residents in this town saw as black and white. No beautifully decorated shop fronts as we have today. For the next few minutes, we'll visit what Gilmore knew. We will see what Gilmore saw, and hopefully we will also see what he experienced in the first 13 or 14 years of his life here. Today when you visit Ballygar, you'll see a rural town very much like so many in Ireland. It's full of welcome and céad míle fáilte and people who are delighted to have visitors from all over the world. But sadly, that wasn't the case 173 years ago. So let's go. And by the way, before we go, remember what I said in episode 1, that there was only 2 monuments to Gilmore in the world. One was in St. Louis, the other one is in Ballygar. We will see that as well. Oh, and by the way, as I am now getting into the habit of saying, don't forget to click like and subscribe over there or down below. Thank you. Bye. So we're just going to quickly scan this diamond square in Ballygar, and it shows in the distance the very wide street that was planned by Dennis Kelly. That street was one of the widest in Ireland, but over there beside that small house there with the 2 windows is a back way, and we'll come back to that in a while. So on to the next location. Here we are. This is literally what Kelly built. It's a fine wide town and so on, and over there on the far side of the road is another entrance to the back way. So we'll go a bit further. And here we are outside Ballygar Square. A huge square built by Kelly, 250 metres of a perimeter. Great marching square, but also a business centre. And that's what he wanted primarily in Ballygar, to attract businesses. In fact, he said, Kelly said in his deposition, question 51, that the market square is nearly as large a market as there is in Athlone. Kelly was very proud of his town. He inspected it once a month for cleanliness and gave out tickets to those that attained his standards. And of course, here is the courthouse where he sat in judgment for all to hear and everyone to fear. And right beside the courthouse, by I suppose by coincidence, is the church. And the church is a pretty large structure, and we'll see that later. But the man that is remembered most was the man that built it, and he was a great adversary of Dennis Kelly. He was a man called Edward Wallace, and his name is at the very bottom of that plaque there. And we're going to just give you an idea. Remember, Gilmore Gilmore basically left this area, left Ireland in 1849. And why was 1849 such a huge year for him? Well, he would have he'd have known people that died and so on. And I'm going to read some letters to give you an idea of how bad this situation was in Ballygar and elsewhere in Ireland. From August of 1849, he wrote a letter to the General Relief Committee in Dublin asking for help, asking for aid to provide Indian meal. It's also called corn on the cob, and so on, to the locals. He said in his letter he would just inform the committee that on Friday last a man called Pat Kelly had died of starvation. Some days previously he had attended a mother of a family in a dark little room and found 5 of her children eating half-boiled cabbage without even meal or salt being mixed through it. He could give numerous other instances, but he thought it unnecessary to do so. There was no employment whatsoever in the area, and people more resembled skeletons than human beings. In fact, he could not describe the wretched condition of the poor in the locality. It completely baffles description, and if something is not done in the next few weeks, he trembles to think of the consequences. That's from August. 2 or 3 months previously, in June of 1849, he wrote another letter. He wrote letters every week looking for the amount that a parish wanted was £10, because if they got £10 they could buy 1 ton of Indian meal and give it out to the poor. Very Reverend and dear sir, says the letter, it is with reluctance, I assure you, that I take up my pen to address you, well aware of the many appeals that are made to your charitable committee. I shall not trespass on your time more than to state the sufferings of my poor parishioners compel me to appeal to your committee for some aid to mitigate their distress. On Thursday, about 300 were at the early hour at my house, expecting some relief. As it was on that day, a week prior, I distributed a ton of Indian meal, which your committee enabled me to give them. Many of them were obliged to live on the stone, the half stone, or the quarter stone which they received, according to the number of their family size, for the entire week. Accordingly, yesterday they went away empty. I fear many of them fainted on the way home for the want of food. This morning I visited the family. My father and mother unable to leave the bed, if I could call it such. A bundle of green rushes almost without covering, being the only thing they had to live on. One of their children died on Tuesday, actually of starvation. There was no one to bury her but a little sister, who brought her to the graveyard in a wheelbarrow. A charitable neighbour opened the grave and buried her without a coffin. It is really harrowing to the human mind to have to relate such scenes of woe, but we are now accustomed to them. In this case, there is not a colour of exaggeration. The father of the girl is John Kelly of Island Case. I fear before this reaches you, himself and his wife and 3 children more will be in the other world for the want of food. There are many other similar cases too tedious to mention, hoping you will call the attention of your charitable committee to the truly distressed and pitiful state of the poor of this district. I am, very reverend, dear sir, most respectfully yours, Edward Wallace, PP, Ballygar. We are at the end of the town, and the plaque to Patrick S Gilmore. It was put up in 1969, 100 years after the National Peace Jubilee in Boston. A wonderful day, and one that I personally will never forget. Now, it says that Gilmore was born in that house. Sadly, that is not true. We've since found. And here's looking down the same street that we just came up. And Gilmore would have left this area as the young lad and walked to school, and he would have gone down this road, which is very much got the characteristics, I suppose, of a 19th century road. It's called the Pound Road, and that's not a reflection on the tariff or the amount of money you have to pay to use the road, but rather the fact that the field on the right was where Dennis Kelly would put your animals, your stock, your livestock and so on and so forth in the pound if you owed him money. A really nice man. Alright, we'll move on now to the next part, his school. This is Trihill School, which Gilmore would have come to school every morning. It was built by the British or the English at the time to standardise the education. There was 2 rooms upstairs for the girls and 2 rooms downstairs for the boys. We'll see this from the far side, but up over the main door there is a beautiful skylight, which you can barely see there now, and up over that there's actually the nameplate of Trihill School itself. Looking in here, this is one of the school rooms that Gilmore would have come into, with the fireplace. Light fittings are a new addition much later on, but the building itself would be original. The stairs would have been out through that door and up to the girls. So we'll have a look from the other side. And so here is the extent of this school. It was built in about the 1830s by the Commission of National Education to standardise the education of the young Catholic population in the country. Different sizes and so on and so forth. But this was the one that was, this was the model that was chosen for this area, presumably because of the population. It would have a capacity of about 150 students. However, it doesn't seem to at any stage have achieved that number. A comprehensive curriculum was taught here: maths, geography, English, trigonometry, science and history, of course, their history. No religion would be taught. However, that was circumvented by the local authorities at the time, and so they got over that. For the next 100 years, the school operated, and of course from this school came P S Gilmore and all of his family and relatives and so on that could afford. Bear in mind, you had to pay a fee to come here, and if you didn't pay the fee, no entry. Now we don't really know what the repercussions were for the other locals, but you might see now in this over this door the skylight, which is eerily beautiful as it happens. So that's Trihill School. It's also a school from where the Logan family came. Logan being the name today of Boston International Airport, and they came from this school as well. So we'll go back to Ballygar now, and thank you. Here we are finally in the what I learned from youth. This lane, this road was called the Backway, and the Backway ran parallel to the main street of Ballygar. When I was a child growing up, I would come home this way and so on and so forth. And then I looked up a document that I have from 1856 called the Griffith Valuation. And I didn't realise at that stage that the name then was actually called Back Lane. And although, again, as a child, I saw businesses being delivered or stopped down this lane, I also can't help wondering if the actual purpose of the back lane was to keep the peasant, as Kelly referred to his tenants, to keep them from the gaze of people at the front of each business on the wide main street. These people weren't dressed the best, they were probably starving, and so on and so forth. And of course the cleanliness of the village mattered an awful lot to Kelly. So I often think that this was actually the route for the tenants to walk from one end of the town to the other end of the town without being seen by any of the better to do people who would frequent the main street. There were also people residing here when the valuation was completed, including Thomas Mee, Judith Greeley, Anthony Crehan, Patrick Mannion, James Milford, Thomas Finnern, Thomas Healy, John Clark, Margaret Casey, Peter Byrne, William Greeny, and Patrick Keogh. Most of those names don't exist here anymore. I dedicate this video to these people and to those Ballygar lost in the famine. Don't forget to click like and subscribe for the next video, and thank you for your attention. Bye bye.